All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Soapine is now presiding. Put all your cell phones off. No chewing gum. Shut the fuck up. Fuck up. No honor amongst thieves. I'm in a crowded room full of smoke. I got my hand on my wallet, the other on my gun, and my eyes is on the dope. My eyes is on the dope. I heard you looking for me, yeah. Saying I'm a fugitive. I'd rather be free, yeah.
Let's make America great again.
I was brought to this land without a name and broken language. Taught to hold a gun, load it up and then aim it. Create laid pavement with very little payment.
One is that you need to understand that the New Orleans Police Department has a 30-year history of deep cellular level problems.
More than 28 years, Kunta Gable, Sidney Hill, and Bernell Jalouk were wrongly incarcerated for the 1994 murder of Rondell Santenac, a crime they did not commit.
One of the biggest things, I'm working on a documentary right now. Okay. It's called Kunta. Oh, Surviving Angola.
Now, it happened when they were just 17 and 18 years old. But on October 19th of last year, the three men were released from prison after newly uncovered evidence linked the crime to former New Orleans police officers.
Top of the morning.
All right, guys. Welcome to Fine Word Entertainment. I am Sydney, also known as Pro Lift. As you all know, we're here to tell Kunta Gable's Surviving Angola story. As a collective, Mr. Adcock, we are all representing Fine Word Entertainment. As you can see, he was the original narrator of this story. Him and Kunta built a very potent and strong relationship in the past few years. And he was the originator that was going to be telling this story and conducting these interviews and things with you. I've been blessed and honored by the family, his fiance, his closest of friends, my Uncle Winburn here, my Uncle Wave. And they kind of threw me this alley hoop to, help facilitate this story and this vision. So this time we got with you while we have you live right now, we basically are going to be focusing mainly on just who you guys are, what's the purpose for taking on this case, and just we're just trying to bring some justice, not only just to Kunta's them story, but to the victims, the family that lost a loved one, Rondell's family as well. So to kick things off, Kunta, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, first of all, I'm Kunta Gable. I was born in 1977. My mother's only child. I have another sibling, which is by my father. Both are now deceased. My mother and my father, they died during my incarceration. I came up with a pretty decent lifestyle, somewhere as my mom's turned to drugs, kind of fell off the path that I was on. I come from a well-grown family. Some kind of way I found my way off into the streets during my youth and kind of confused due to my mom being on drugs. That led to me being in a few situations that probably led to me going to jail.
Okay. Mr. John, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a civil rights lawyer in New Orleans. I've had my own practice since 2009. My first year out of college, I was a second grade teacher, and then figured I want to do something more political to help the voiceless, basically people who don't have resources. And so I came down to New Orleans to work for a nonprofit that was representing poor people facing the death penalty all over Louisiana, and did that for about 5 years. Then went to law school. Then worked for the Innocence Project, and I was a public defender, and I volunteered for the Obama campaign in 2008 in North Carolina, and opened my practice here in 2009, and been civil rights attorney ever since, and sue a lot of jails, a lot of housing discrimination, whistleblower stuff, and recently I've been doing voting. I'm doing redistricting here in Louisiana, so going well. So that's kind of what I do. And then Kunta's case is kind of in my wheelhouse in such a way where I used to do all criminal defense and represent people in post-conviction, very familiar with the New Orleans DA's office, the problems they were having in the 1990s and before. And so this kind of brings me back to my roots of what I was doing when I first got involved with the criminal justice system. So it's kind of me.
Okay. I love your segue. I love how you pretty much killed like 3-4 birds with one stone there. You basically answered like 4 or 5 questions in one there. So back to Kunta. Kunta, where did the name Kunta come from?
This kind of sort of came out of left field in my family. As I was explaining this to a few stories, my life went on because I never really asked my mom's personally why she named me the name, but I did get the name in 1977. Here the movie came out. I was born in February. So it was actually doing Black History.
Right.
I was named after my father, Herbert, and for some strange reason, during that process, mom's started to go on course, name me herself. Maybe that was during the process of just going through her little, my father, and she turned to drugs. So that played a big part in it.
Okay. Mr. John, how many cases of this magnitude that you've been attached to individually, as a firm? Yeah, how many cases of this magnitude? Because I mean, when we're talking civil, that's pretty big. I mean, when I heard you say earlier that you sue jails and correctional facilities, that means you're after big fish. So, of this magnitude, let's talk about how many cases that you've actually been attached to or taken on of this magnitude.
I mean, this is a pretty big one. I mean, I sue, a lot of what I do in housing discriminations is I sue entire towns and parish governments, county governments here in Louisiana. And 2 years ago, year and a half ago, I did this big case against the Baton Rouge Police Department where they arrested a bunch of protesters after Alton Sterling's death at the hands of Baton Rouge police. That settled very well for my clients. My cases against parishes are a lot of work. They're, very big cases. The voting cases is, you're suing the state to change the maps for the state legislature and Congress. Those are pretty big. But I guess to directly answer your question, I've only done one other wrongful conviction case, kind of two, really. One was John Floyd, who was arrested around about 1980, was in prison for about, 36 years, something crazy like that. Involved the same DA's office. A conviction in 1981, and not very good police officers too. So did that one, and then did another one where it was up in North Louisiana. We were doing a compensation trial. So it wasn't a civil rights lawsuit. We were actually seeking compensation for 2 guys who had been on death row for about 15 years, Michael Graham and Albert Burrell. And they'd actually filed a lawsuit and lost. And I came in to do the compensation with some other very gifted attorneys. And we litigated that very, very well, but that didn't go well either. So I guess you said it's my third one like this. So, but this is probably the biggest one. It seems larger. I mean, all these cases are a lot of work, but it seems larger in scope because of this Len Davis angle.
Correct.
The fact that the federal government was kind of surveilling him while this was going on, while he was framing Kunta and putting him in jail, which makes this kind of extraordinary in that way.
Okay. So
let me know if that didn't answer your question.
Well, that was another beautiful segue. So since we're already kind of leaning towards our next series of questions, it seems to me that you've had some type of relations with the state of Louisiana for some time now. And when you're practicing law, I'm assuming whether you're on the defensive side of things or if you're on the prosecution side of things, there are relationships that are built between attorneys and people that are practicing law, correct? So does the name Miss Julie Tizzard ring a bell?
I know the name, yeah. I know of her, and I certainly know about her connection to Kunta.
I just remember his name, but I don't have any memory of anything about this case.
Okay. So how long you known Ms. Tizzard?
I don't know her. I knew of her when she was, this is back when I was an investigator and I was doing a lot of work around Tulane and Broad. That's our criminal courthouse in New Orleans. And I just knew the name. I don't know how I knew the name, but I knew of her, and then she went into private practice. But I've never done any cases with her or done any cases against her, whether they be criminal or civil. I just know the name, and like I say, know about her connection to Kunta and Kunta's case.
Approximately what year was this you met her or you knew of her?
I've never met her. This is like 2001.
Okay, so we're talking over 2 decades or better.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about our current and I mean, it just, being attached to this story, because this is a very sensitive situation. We're talking 3 teenagers that did a lot of time, and we're talking about an entire family that to this day, 30 years later, they still haven't gotten the proper closure from an entire state, from New Orleans district attorney's office, as entities. Like this family hasn't gotten that closure, and I understand, practicing law and being attached to cases and things of this nature. I can only imagine how mind-wrecking it can get at times. But Ms. Tizzard and Jason Williams, the guy that's currently over things right now, can you tell me a little bit about him?
Yeah, Jason spent his career as a criminal defense attorney, and he was very gifted attorney and had a lot of success in the courtroom, able to keep a lot of balls in the air, very good order, works very hard, had a really good office of like-minded attorneys who were very good members of the criminal defense community, always willing to do the right thing by people. He got elected to be an at-large member of our city council, and I was impressed about the kind of progressive direction of some of their policies, which I thought were relatively new for New Orleans. And he was part of the leadership behind that. And then I supported his run for district attorney because he was going to be a progressive. I thought we were putting too many people in jail that didn't belong in jail. And I thought that office was used incarceration way too much and wanted to incarcerate people for way too long for certain things.
Systematic oppression, basically.
Yeah, well, like for instance, like someone who has 3 nonviolent offenses or 1 violent offense and 2 nonviolent offenses, and they say, well, they're eligible for life in prison under our 3 strikes law. Like they just use that too much in the prior regime, and I thought there needed to be a change in that way and many others. And then he came in, he started a civil rights division, which was basically a conviction integrity unit that looked at old cases that weren't getting review. A lot of people that didn't have a lawyer, and they were just kind of going through them. And if certain convictions like Kunta's raised red flags, then they would look at the case, investigate the case, and eventually do the right thing, which they did in Kunta's case. So I just thought that was a step in the right direction in terms of how we should have a criminal justice system. And so, and thankfully the people of New Orleans agree with me, and they elected Jason. So don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, that's my short answer about Jason.
Okay. Speaking of red flags, Kunta, what was your relationship like between you and your peers growing up in the 80s in New Orleans?
Well, to be honest with you, that was pretty being co-defendant, Jalou, former co-defendant, Mr. Jalou. We've been knowing each other since maybe like 10, 11 months. Stayed right next door to each other, so we've been running together since we were like 11 months. Sydney Hill, which is another neighborhood friend, which is a former, friend of mine. Met Leroy kind of like maybe around our starting of school, probably like around 6 or 7 years old. Elementary, we all shared the same elementary school. So our mothers knew each other from the neighborhood, and we just kind of grew up together, in same environment. The environment was cool in the 80s. Project neighborhood, our housing project, which was one of the safest neighborhoods out of the project side in New Orleans, period. One of the safest projects.
Okay. Mr. John, what disturbed you the most about this case when you learned about it, and what really made you want to take on this case?
I think it was probably twofold. One is I wanted to get back into criminal defense work, but it was hard to do because I stopped doing it because kind of every case I thought was kind of the same. It's like the cops didn't do what they were supposed to, stuff's not being turned over, the racism in the justice system, on and on and on. And just as my wife said, it made me a unlikable person when I would do criminal cases. So I was looking for an angle to get back in where I wasn't directly representing someone. And so for that reason, I wasn't good at it anymore. And so I wanted to do it where I was kind of attacking the system, like kind of going after the system. And Kunta's case was enticing for that reason, is that we get to pick apart all the wrongs that were done to Kunta on a system-wide basis. That was interesting to me and motivating to me. And then the other thing was this Len Davis thing. I thought that what I had read about New Orleans in at least the first part of the 1990s, where you're dealing with basically almost a society that had collapsed, or a city government that had collapsed. And there was no overview of the police department, just to use one example. And so you had police officers running around committing felonies all over town. As one person said, they were the largest gang in New Orleans, was the New Orleans Police Department at the time. And so I think that's that kind of misconduct, lack of direction, lack of discipline on that scale is unique. And so I thought it was interesting to be able to kind of go back to that time in New Orleans and see what factors caused that to happen. And those are the two things that were interesting to me.
Okay, so when we talk about a society, do you feel like the systematic oppression that's been going on in Louisiana since late 80s, early 90s, do you feel as if this is just a Louisiana issue, or do you feel like men of color people of color? Do you feel like this is something that people in Louisiana just deal with, especially of cases of this magnitude? Do you feel like places like California, places like Colorado, places like Nevada, do you feel like 3 teenagers in the late 80s, early 90s getting charged with something like this, do you feel like they would have just sat for 28, 30 years in prison, knowing that the feds were involved and knowing that the feds had these departments under surveillance? Do you feel like this was something just going on mainly in Louisiana, or do you feel like, you know, if this case would have took place anywhere in the country, what do you feel the outcome could have been?
Well, I certainly feel like that Black lives are devalued in many places in America, but I think your question's a different one. I hear you. It's hard to say. I mean, I would tend to say yes, that like for the reasons you just lay out, which is kind of, we know all the sins of the bad actors in Kunta's case, yet we might be talking about the worst police officer in America. Was the person who ran the investigation in Kunta's case, and there was no one in the DA's office, and city government and the police department says, look, we got to look at all the people that Len Davis and his partner Sammie Williams arrested or investigated, and we got to review those cases again. Because literally there's, you know, Len Davis is going around taking money from drug dealers, and in exchange for that, covering up the murders they do. It's like, if you do the murder, tell me you're going to do it, and then I'll handle the investigation, and I'll make sure the investigation goes away from you. That was his MO. There's several examples of that. And that was known to the authorities, certainly known to the federal government. And that hasn't been kind of looked at since then is, I mean, it's disappointing, but it's hard to fathom. And then in other parts of the country, other cities similar to New Orleans, Philadelphia, for instance, they have these conviction integrity units. They have, whether it be an innocence commission they have in North Carolina, they look at these old convictions to see whether they got the wrong person. And that's a good thing, because kind of everyone come together. You're not defaulted because you didn't file something in time, for instance. And we don't have that in Louisiana. And it seems like, in terms of kind of injustices of the criminal justice system, that the Deep South is where it's the worst. And Kunta will know about this. This is just one example. There was
Well, I know about it too. I grew up in Georgia. I lived in Georgia 17 years of my life. So
yeah.
Georgia is no different than Louisiana, but you can continue.
I'm sure. Kunta will know about this story. We have a Supreme Court in Louisiana, and then we have 5 courts of appeals. And the Court of Appeal in Gretna, which is across the river from here, had this scandal that nobody did anything about. And it's been investigated. The facts are out there. You can read the articles, but basically they just had a policy for about 15 years. Any kind of prisoner who filed a brief saying, you know, I got an illegal sentence, or I'm innocent, or my lawyer was ineffective, whatever, they just had a system where they would summarily deny those briefs, deny those appeals without even reading the brief. It was just a policy. And there was no investigation about that. No one got fired, no one got disciplined, no one got disbarred. And it resulted in hundreds of people not having their convictions reviewed, even though there must be error in there, just as a percentage. And that's just one example that seems to illustrate how Louisiana is kind of different in this regard. So that's my response.
So being that Louisiana is different, I mean, you went out the way and you're the expert when we're talking about law, when we're talking about everybody that's on this call right now. I mean, Kunta's an expert too, because to survive Angola, to survive one of America's most, wickedest, places to do time at. I can only imagine, what went through this man's mind those 28 summers. And I know that could turn you into an attorney. It can turn you into this monster where my freedom is all I want. My truth is all I want. Peace is all this man has ever wanted. So when we think of all of those things and all of those variables, you are aware that Tizzard was originally involved with his prosecution, correct?
She was in the DA's office at the time he went to the grand jury, certainly, yeah.
Okay.
Is she still his lawyer?
No, she's not his lawyer. She was Kunta's lawyer for a number of years, and Kunta paid her money to file motions in his case, try to get him out of jail, and she didn't do what she was supposed to, and she didn't give the money back. So.
I think they tried to hire me, but then I realized that I had handled the case maybe on appeal when I was a prosecutor, so I never represented him.
I mean, she filed stuff, but she didn't do much beyond that. So
the system is so lax that she was able to prosecute him and get him incarcerated and then come back years later and defend him. That was kind of weird. As being a person that's been incarcerated in California, this whole setup is just outlandish. The things that the system is doing, the things that the police were doing, it just, I can't even grasp it coming from here. So it's like you just mentioned that where did this system fall at? Like, did you see or come up with where they started this problem at, or what time of what year this cave-in started, where the police could just do the police was just gangsters, basically.
That's right. I don't think that overstates it. I'm still looking into that. I can tell you that it was kind of a by 1994, it was, I mean, the New Orleans Police Department started off in post-Civil War 19th century as their major task was to catch runaway slaves. That's what they were created for during Reconstruction. By 1994, they had 5 superintendents in about 6 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. And they had it's in our complaint, a man named Mr. Archie, who was basically lynched in broad daylight in New Orleans by the police, killed after he had shot another police officer, and no one was disciplined for it. And you just had a system that had gone a long time without any oversight, without any proper disciplinary measures. And I think, in my opinion, it was allowed to be that way because the people whose lives were ruined are not people of power. And it did not influence the power brokers who were running the city, whether it be in 1950 or whether it be in 1990. So I think that's what it is. I'm still investigating that, but that's the best I can come up with right now. So, yeah.
So I got a question for Kunta. In what year did the crack epidemic hit your city?
Basically, well, it was full-fledged, like, say, 86, 87.
86 is when it blew up.
Yes, it was really major, like 86, 87, but maybe like years previously before that, you only like had a few people or seen a few people that was on something that you wasn't familiar with. Around like 86, 87, it really just, it kind of like took over.
Was that about the time that the Len dude started his bull jive?
Well, Len, to be honest with you, Len, me and I never really had any personal encounters with this guy. But several of his officers as defenders of his, had encounters with those guys. So
about that time of year?
No, during those years in the 80s, nah, literally, I was straight then. I was basically still in home, room with the family or whatnot. That was right before my mother really got onto that product.
Okay.
And so when she kind of experienced off and that kind of peed me off because she was for me, put me on a lot. She taught me things that school couldn't teach me or the streets couldn't teach me.
Right.
That being said, you know what I'm saying, kind of hurt me to be off and use drugs when she about things like that. And around 91 or 90 is when I could really say that thing got erratic in the city.
Yeah.
Colors played a big part in it. Colors movie first hit, in the end of the 80s, how Colors was doing this thing. Some kind of way it almost crossed over to New Orleans. Guys went to grabbing rags, blah, blah, blah. I just went haywire. Thought you with a rag on, whether it was red or blue. But they'll beat you senseless. They was not about to let that start by the city. And from that era, from beginning 89, 90, I've been on real bad. That's where you really can know every cop by name from other districts. You never had any encounter with them. You listen to music in our city. You would hear the youth call these cops by name like they're real gangsters. These cops make songs all day. And a few of the cops that's in my charge, they over several songs in the city. So dudes been screaming about these cops for years. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about talking about it over consistently. Everybody know them, but when it comes to the court system, for some reason, they gonna take the cop's side. My situation, I feel like if it wasn't on wiretap, I wouldn't be home. That's guaranteed. That's facts. I would not be home. Okay, Miss Julie Tizzard, I have to keep going back to her, but I have to, because set on my case for 7.5 years. She was waiting on me to die.
Well, I hope he's happy and thriving. I'm sure he is.
Because she knew that she had involvement in my indictment. So you literally ain't filed nothing in 7 years. And if she files something, I need to see it because I've never seen anything in the whole entire 7 years that she filed. All she kept telling me and advising me is to get your GED. I'm very tight with the head district attorney, which was Canizero at the time. And all I have to do is draw up a writ. He's going to let you loose. You don't have to testify anything. He was literally trying to sneak me out with having putting herself on the spot. Literally, she never got off my case. She never asked me could she give my case to anybody else. He just literally transferred all my stuff over to another attorney, which was my juvenile attorney. The only reason she turned the information over to my juvenile attorney because he found out that she had part in my indictment. So when he explained to me, do you know that the attorney that you have representing you is the same district attorney that had part in your indictment? I said, well, this is why she consistently asked me everything that I sent to her, investigate over them 7 years. Where you get this information from? How you know this? Where you get that from? How you know this?
So who gave you that information?
Mr. Gable, actually.
Oh yeah, that's not accurate.
Is there any more? She was literally trying to clean up the whole case. She was cleaning up while I was steady exposing. And I'm steady telling her. So now we get to this point where I'm like, hey man, I ain't never read this. I've read a lot of cases in my life, bro. In that prison, I read everything I could to try to help myself out.
But we reached the conclusion of episode 1, guys. I feel that we've had a lot of success today. I hope and pray each and every episode as we continue to tell your story, tell this story. We make progress each and every time, and I feel like as a unit, as long as we all on the same page, it'll go in the direction that we want it to go.
Pray to my God, he know what to do. No, you can't fool me, no, you can't lose me. They say they love me, but they ain't love me when I was Joseph. Pray to my God, he know what to do. No, you can't fool me, no, you can't lose me. They say they love me, but they ain't love me when I was Joseph. But my heart never drop, RMF never flock, but my feelings stay on cop. When you see me, act like you don't know me, keep it the same like I was Joseph. Pray to my God, he kept me focused, lay by myself with no one to hope. Called your phone, you say who is this? I told you snatch it, say you don't know me. Lie to myself, my cousin say he love you, I know what you did, like
Hey, this for Kunta, you know? Man, look, we made it, Kunta. We graduated, bro. Got Fat Mac with me, you know, Bird, Tonio, we got this, bro. Team Detox, man. Stay up out there, bro. You heard me? We gonna move it. We got it, baby. Just come out there iron power work, you know how we do, man. I'm on Fat Mac, too, you heard me? We gonna walk that football field. We gonna walk that football field. Yeah, nah, stay up out there, man. Team Detox, baby.